Hey everyone, welcome back to IB Watching.
Today we'll be talking about some international and national current events, like the storming of the U.S. Capitol and the international response to it, President Biden's executive orders, the protests in Russia after Alexei Navalny's arrest, the farmer protests in India, as well as current situations around the stock market and Gamestop.
Let's start by talking about the Capitol insurrection.
The storming of the U.S. Capitol took place on the 6th of January this year, where a group of extremists in support of former President Trump broke through the police perimeters and entered the Capitol building, hoping to prevent the official counting of the Electoral College's votes, as well as the certification of President Biden by former Vice President Pence.
It is important to note that not all of the protesters were violent and broke into the Capitol building. A majority of the violent insurrectionists claimed to be the Three Percenters, the Oath Keepers, the Proud Boys, and the Texas Freedom Force. Many others self-proclaimed white supremacists or neo-Nazis. Due to safety concerns, the congressmen were evacuated from the Senate and House of Representatives.
Once security was breached and the rioters were inside of the building, the Capitol Police responded with tear gas and strobe lights. One insurrectionist was shot upon entry by an officer of the Capitol Police. Once inside, some of the mob turned violent, leading to a Capitol Police officer being brutally assaulted, who later died from his injuries.
Former President Trump responded to the Capitol riots via a tweet on Twitter, which read, "These are the things and events that happen when a sacred landslide election victory is so unceremoniously and viciously stripped away from great patriots who have been badly and unfairly treated for so long. Go home with love and in peace."
The international responses to the riot included several condemnations from Democratic leaders around the world, including ones by UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson and Swedish Prime Minister Stefan Löfven.
Now, we'll move on to our next topic, President Biden's executive orders, since he has taken office.
Joe Biden became the 46th President of the United States on the 20th of January. In that time, he made 42 executive orders to date, to undo many changes made during the Trump administration. Among these executive orders is an order to rejoin the Paris Accord and continue developing reliable alternate sources of energy, along with developing a climate financial plan, directing capital away from high-carbon investments and towards climate-aligned investments.
An executive order was also signed to reduce profit-based incentives to incarcerate by reducing the government's reliance on privately operated criminal detention facilities. There is also a call to increase focus on rehabilitation and reintegration of incarcerated individuals into their communities.
An executive order that allows all qualified Americans to serve their country in uniform counters the Trump-era ban on transgender persons in the military, allowing transgender persons to enlist in the military and putting a stop to the involuntary discharges of transgender troops who were already serving.
Another executive order mandated that all independent agencies do everything under their power and within the law to provide economic relief to individuals, families, and small businesses. The executive order does not create any relief by itself, but instead hopes to direct independent agencies to create their own forms of relief.
In the letter to His Excellency Antonio Guterres, President Biden has stopped the United States' withdrawal from the World Health Organization and made Dr. Anthony Fauci the head delegate to the WHO.
Moving on, let's talk about some foreign riots and protests.
There are many riots and protests taking place internationally. I will be discussing the riots caused by Alexei Navalny, the leading political rival to Russian President Vladimir Putin's arrest upon his return to Russia after his poisoning in August of 2020 and after his treatment in Germany. These protests were sparked throughout Russia. From the far west to the far east, protests against Putinism have taken place in sub-zero temperatures in Siberia, as well as in major cities such as St. Petersburg and Moscow. Russian police brutality has led to many public beatings of protesters and rioters in Russia, as well as over 3,000 arrests so far. Lavani has said that he does not condone the violence. However, his organization, the Anti-Corruption Foundation, has since released more information on the Putin's palace on the Black Sea, which supposedly belongs to Putin and cost over $1 billion to be constructed. The release of this information led to more protests, and the Kremlin is promising to investigate the claims that this billion-dollar palace does indeed belong to Putin.
In India, farmers have been protesting against the removal of government protections. The government seeks to create a more free marketplace, but in doing so, leaves farmers at the mercy of private corporations, who may not have the farmers' best interests at heart. The removal of several government protections, such as minimum prices for essential crops, allows for competitive pricing in the market, which can severely reduce crop prices and harm the farmers' livelihoods. Around 60% of India's population depends on farming for a livelihood, so a majority of citizens support the farmers in their cause. However, a good deal of violence has arisen from this, as the riots have incited 25 criminal cases, injured 400 police officers, destroyed 428 police barricades, and damaged 30 police vehicles.
These are only two examples of international protests. However, there are many more protests happening around the world in different countries. Now we'll move on from the international riots and protests to the stock market, Gamestop, Robinhood, and Reddit.
There are a lot of things that one needs to understand what is going on with the stock market at the moment. So let's start with some definitions. A hedge fund is a limited partnership of investors that uses high-risk methods, such as investing with borrowed money, in hopes of realizing large capital gains. In this case, hedge fund managers were using a technique called shorting in order to profit. Shorting is when someone borrows a stock and sells it, hoping to buy back the stock at a lower price to profit. However, since the stock was borrowed initially, it must be returned and bought back, even if that person needs to buy the stock at a higher price.
The video game company Gamestop had been struggling during the pandemic, and its stocks were low, and it was briefly overpriced in the stock market. Due to this, hedge funds targeted GameStop, knowing that they would make a profit off of these lower prices. However, the subreddit r/wallstreetbets also noticed this and took a different approach. These independent investors invested millions of dollars into GameStop, AMC, and several other corporations, causing their stocks to skyrocket, forcing hedge funds to lose billions of dollars due to their shorting tactics.
Robinhood, a stock trading and investment app that was already heavily mocked, has made it so that users can only buy one stock of GameStop. There are many different theories as to why this might have happened, from collusion between Robinhood and hedge funds to simply stock trading protocol. Some investors in GameStop have made more than $1 billion off of the 1,600% rise in GameStop stocks.
Now to move on to our opinions section for the day. So we covered a lot today, and I have some very strong opinions about a lot of it. So just briefly, as for the Capitol insurrection, the storming of the Capitol building, I don't condone it at all. The violence was unnecessary, and I feel it came at a very bad time for the United States. It kind of made us look like a laughingstock briefly, and I feel like it happened right before lots of other protests around the globe, and I feel we kind of let down democracy and kind of let the rest of the world run free with their riots and violence because they saw that it could happen at the Capitol building, and that really gave people who lived in even more oppressed countries the feeling that, well, if they can do that in the United States, we must be able to do that here. And then, as for Biden's executive orders, I'm really happy with most of them. He's really undoing quite a lot of things that were very damaging to the environment, as well as to the morale of people in the United States, especially when it comes to the transgender ban in the United States military. I think undoing that has really helped a lot of people who were feeling the struggles because of that. And then foreign riots and protests. It's very interesting listening to the farmers' riots in India because apparently they have been going on for months, and I only heard about them for the first time this week, which is really weird, and it just tells you how much the United States media really doesn't talk about what's going on in other countries unless it's Russia, because I've heard a lot about the Russian protests because they are someone that the United States media tends to comment on. However, the Indian protests I had to hear about from a friend of mine from India before I even read about it in the news, and to this day I still haven't seen it in any of the major news sources in the United States. And then lastly, as for the stock market, it's hard to put into words how I feel about that, because manipulating the stock market is very interesting, because if companies had done it, that would have been very illegal. But there's no protections against the people doing it, and I find it highly amusing that the people can change the tides so much. They turned the tables, and they made companies lose billions of dollars, and I feel that that was a very interesting choice by the people. However, I think it definitely shows that the people still have a lot of control in the United States, even when they feel like they don't have it.
Yeah, I agree with a lot of that. When it comes to the Capitol insurrection, I do feel like it kind of made the United States a laughingstock for democracy because we pride ourselves on our democratic process, on our peaceful transitions to power, and yet we had this happen. And I just feel like it's giving democracy quite a bad reputation following the already fleeting reputation it has. So I feel like it just highlights the worst parts of democracy, and we have to do a better job as a nation just focusing on how we can improve our democratic process and whatnot. When it comes to President Biden's executive orders, I think a lot of them were really good. One that I really liked was the focus on reducing government reliance on privately operated for profit criminal detention facilities, because I feel like incarceration for profit should have never become a thing due to the fact that incentivizing incarceration only further increases the United States incarceration rate, which is already the highest out of any country. So I feel as if that is one step that we can take towards solving that problem. When it comes to the foreign riots and protests, I was in the same boat as Cole, actually. I didn't know about the India protests until he had told me about them. And then I went to go ask my parents, and they had known about it. So this is something that I feel like should be covered more. And in general, I think foreign policies and foreign affairs should be covered more in United States media. And I feel like a lot of things that are covered in United States media aren't as important in a global sense than some of these foreign riots and protests. So I feel like there should be more coverage of that. When it comes to the stock market, GameStop, Robinhood, and Reddit, I found it quite amusing that Wall Street hedge fund managers, the same people that have been saying pull yourself up by the bootstraps this entire time and saying the stock market's open to everyone, they've been trying to promote a free market this entire time, suddenly turns their back on that entire process and says, oh, now that we're losing money, we need people to stop buying shares of GameStop. We need people to stop this. And they're trying to stop that free market process that they had so heavily invested in previously. So I feel like that whole aspect kind of shows just some of the narcissistic tendencies of some of the Wall Street hedge fund managers. Anyways, thank you for listening.
Please like, subscribe, and leave a comment. We'll see you next time on I Be Watching.